Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really going to explore the history of Taiwan. It's a fascinating place, isn't it? Such a complex story with, huge global relevance.
Absolutely. And we've got a great overview here covering, well, pretty much everything from the earliest people there right up to its role today.
Exactly. And our goal for you listening is to pull out the really key stuff, the surprising bits from Taiwan's past. We
Right.
want those aha moments, the connections that make sense of it all, but without getting bogged down.
Sort of cutting through the noise to get to the core insights.
Right. Okay, let's get into it. First off, you really can't ignore Taiwan's geography, can you? I mean, right there where the East China Sea, Philippine Sea, and the Pacific meet.
It's prime real estate, historically speaking. Makes total sense why it was always a transit point, and pretty key for anyone looking to expand in Asia.
Yeah, a strategic spot.
And that constant interaction, being at this crossroads, it probably fostered a certain resilience and adaptability you still see today. They've always had to navigate these external forces.
That's a great point. And the timeline here is just staggering. People living there for maybe 20,000 years.
Yeah, the evidence suggests pretty continuous settlement. And then you have the Austronesian peoples setting up more permanent communities maybe 6,000 years ago. So really deep history.
Wow. And we have actual proof, right? Archaeology.
We do. Places like the Chambin site, they found stone tools there about 5,000 years old. And Nangong Dong has evidence of rice and millet cultivation even further back, like 4,500 to 4,900 years ago.
So farming was happening early on.
Definitely points to prehistoric Austronesian farming.
And these early societies, they were often organized around local clans. What does that mean practically?
Well, basically, it often meant the husband moved in with the wife's family. And yeah, once agriculture took hold, rice and millet became the staples. Pretty standard setup for many early agricultural groups.
Interesting. And there's this linguistic thread connecting Taiwanese Austronesians to people across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, Lao-Polynesian speakers.
Exactly. It's like a window into these vast ancient migrations. Shows how interconnected people were even thousands of years ago.
It really paints a picture. Now, shifting focus a bit, what happened when Han Chinese settlers started arriving on the Western Plains?
Well, that led to significant changes. You see some indigenous plains tribes, like the Matsai, Sawan, and Amis, moving westward and adopting agriculture more fully.
Adapting to the new reality.
Right. But sadly, for many of those western and northern plains groups, as the Han population grew, their distinct cultures and languages were often absorbed. They gradually disappeared into the broader Han society.
That's a pattern we see elsewhere too, unfortunately. But not all groups.
No, the tribes in the east and in the mountains, partly due to geography, managed to hold on to their languages and cultures much more effectively. That continuity is really important.
Okay. And when do we start seeing Taiwan pop up in written records from outside?
It's intriguing. There's a mention, possibly by the Persian explorer Ibn Battuta, or maybe his informants in the 14th century. They talk about a mountainous island.
A bit vague, but an early sign.
And then fast forward to the mid-16th century, and you start seeing names like Taiwan and Formosa on European maps. Formica, of course, means beautiful in Portuguese.
Likely named by sailors struck by the view.
Probably. So even before the major colonization efforts, it was on the map, quite literally, entering that global consciousness.
Which leads us neatly into European colonization. The Dutch were first with a major foothold, right? 1624 to 1662.
That's right. They set up Fort Zeelandia near modern-day Tainan.
And what were they up to besides building forts?
Well, it was classic colonial activity, really, asserting control over the indigenous peoples, sometimes forcefully, but also luring Han Chinese settlers over from Fujian, often for labor.
A mix of invasion and invitation almost.
Kind of. And then the game changed dramatically in 1662 with Zheng Chenggong, Koxinga, as he's also known.
Ah, yes. He saw an opportunity with the disputes.
Exactly. He used the situation to basically drive the Dutch out. The famous burning of Fort Zeelandia is part of that story.
And his son, Zheng Jing, took a different approach, more focus on development.
Yeah, under Zheng Jing, there was more emphasis on, public administration, culture, things that helped Taiwan develop internally during their rule.
So it wasn't just about military control for the Zhengs. They were building something.
Definitely.
Well,
They actively encouraged international trade using their fleet based out of Anping. They really broadened Taiwan's contacts.
what kind of things were they trading?
The exports were mainly resources from the island, rice, sugar, deer hides, which were very valuable then.
And imports.
Things they needed or wanted, cloth, medicines, copper, even beads. It shows they were plugged into regional trade networks.
Who were they trading with? Just China?
Oh, much wider than that. The Dutch, even after being kicked out formally, the French, parts of China certainly, but also Japan, Vietnam, other places in the South China Sea, it was quite extensive for the time.
But the Zheng era didn't last forever. The Qing Dynasty stepped in eventually.
Right. In 1683, the king defeated the Zhengs and annexed Taiwan. Interestingly, they were apparently a bit reluctant at first.
Really? Why?
Maybe saw it as peripheral or a potential source of trouble with Ming loyalists. But the economics probably swayed them, especially the sugar trade.
Money talks. Sugar was big business.
It really was. That economic potential seems key to why the king decided to fully integrate the island.
Okay, let's jump forward quite a bit. A huge shift happens in 1895.
Yes, the Treaty of Shimonoseki. After the First Sino-Japanese War, China loses, and Taiwan is ceded to Japan. A major, major turning point.
Beginning almost half a century of Japanese rule. What were their main goals?
Well, full governance, definitely. And modernization. They invested heavily in infrastructure, widening streets, building roads, railways, dredging harbors.
They wanted to make it a model colony, didn't they?
That was the phrase, yeah. Showcasing Japanese administrative capability. And part of that involved assimilation, getting Taiwanese people to learn Japanese, adopt Japanese customs. Japanese language in schools was a big part of that.
So infrastructure and cultural change.
And economic development, too. Improving industry, public works, making the island productive for the Japanese Empire.
Did the assimilation policy change over time?
It seems it intensified, especially as Taiwanese nationalism started to stir. The push became stronger to make Taiwanese people loyal subjects of the Japanese emperor.
But people resisted.
Oh, yes. There were resistance movements. The formation of the Friesish Party is one example, though their rebellion ultimately failed and was suppressed quite harshly.
And this period ends with World War II.
Exactly. Japan surrenders in 1945, and Taiwan is handed over to the Republic of China government, led by the Chinese Nationalist Party, the KMT.
But that Japanese era left a deep impact, didn't it?
Undeniably. You can still see its influence today in infrastructure, some legal frameworks, even cultural aspects. It profoundly shaped Taiwan's trajectory.
So October 1945, Taiwan becomes territory governed by the Republic of China, the ROC. Japanese forces surrendered to them on the island.
Yep.
But that handover, well, it wasn't smooth. You had a large influx of officials and military personnel from mainland China.
And that caused problems.
It did. Led to political tensions, economic stress. The new administration wasn't very popular with many locals who'd lived under Japanese rule.
Which tragically led to the 228 incident.
Yes. In March 1947, widespread unrest met with brutal government suppression. It's a scar, a really significant, painful memory in Taiwan.
A very difficult start to that period.
Made even more complex just 2 years later, in 1949. The communists win the civil war on the mainland.
And the KMT government, the ROC leadership, retreats to Taiwan.
Precisely. While Mao Zedong proclaims the People's Republic of China, PRC, in Beijing, this sets up the whole cross-strait dynamic we still grapple with today.
And led to a long period of martial law in Taiwan itself.
A very long period, from 1949 all the way to 1987. It was an authoritarian era officially justified by the threat of communism, but it also meant suppressing dissent.
The White Terror. Yes, the White Terror, where many perceived political opponents were persecuted. A dark chapter.
Yet, paradoxically, during this politically restrictive time, Taiwan's economy boomed.
It did. The Taiwan economic miracle. From the 60s through the 90s, really rapid industrialization, growth driven by exports, especially later in electronics and tech, a huge transformation.
So, authoritarian politics, but runaway economic success.
For a time, yes. But eventually, the pressure for political change grew too strong.
And democratization finally happened.
Yes. Martial law lifted in '87. Opposition parties, like the DPP, were allowed. Then a gradual liberalization, leading up to things like the first direct legislative elections in 2008. It's quite a remarkable journey to the democracy Taiwan is today.
All these layers of history, indigenous roots, Dutch, Zheng, Qing, Japanese, then the ROC-PMT arrival, it must have created a really complex sense of identity.
Absolutely. You really see the emergence of a distinct Taiwanese identity, particularly accelerating after martial law ended. It's consciously differentiating itself from a solely Chinese identity.
And language plays a big role in that, right?
Huge. After being suppressed, the revival and promotion of local languages like Halo and Hakka became really important symbols and expressions of that Taiwanese identity.
Are there specific cultural movements working on this?
Oh, yes. Efforts to define and promote Taiwanese culture, incorporating everything from traditional arts to, importantly, celebrating the indigenous Austronesian heritage, which was overlooked for a long time.
So it's an ongoing conversation defining Taiwaneseness.
Definitely. It involves history, language, culture, political views. It's all intertwined. And those colonial experiences, how people reacted to Chineseness imposed after 1945, that's a massive part of the identity narrative, too.
Which brings us right up against the complexities of cross-strait relations and Taiwan's international position. The PRC's One China policy is obviously central.
It looms large over everything, yes. Their position is unification. Meanwhile, the ROC on Taiwan, well, its stance has evolved. Initially, it claimed to be the government of all China.
But that's shifted.
Significantly. Relations across the strait have seen cycles of tension and sometimes limited dialogue. It's always delicate.
And internationally, Taiwan faces major hurdles. Losing the UN seat in 1971 was a big blow.
A huge blow, driven by PRC pressure. It continues to make participation in international organizations very challenging. They often have to find creative ways to engage globally.
So constantly navigating this difficult path, trying to maintain sovereignty while dealing with Beijing.
That's the core challenge, yes. Defining its place in the world under unique and intense pressure.
Looking inside Taiwan again, that rapid economic growth we mentioned, it must have had environmental consequences too.
Oh, absolutely. Rapid industrialization rarely comes without a cost. Pollution, changes to the landscape, these became serious issues.
But people pushed back.
Yes. You saw the rise of quite strong environmental movements in Taiwan pushing for environmental justice and more sustainable practices, another facet of its modern development.
And socially, besides the economy.
Big shifts. Migration patterns changed with historical events and economic pulls. Education evolved dramatically from the Japanese system through the KMT's initial focus on Chinese identity to now where there's much more emphasis on local culture and history in schools.
And the structure of society itself changed.
Massively. High employment became the norm. Agriculture shrank as a share of the economy. The service sector grew. Education levels soared. It's a fundamentally different society than it was 70 years ago.
So looking ahead, what are the main challenges and opportunities for Taiwan?
Well, politically, that cross-strait relationship remains the dominant challenge, alongside internal political debates, of course.
And economically?
Economically, it's well-positioned. A highly developed economy, a world leader in crucial technologies like semiconductors. The opportunity is to leverage that strength in the global market.
And that quest for identity and recognition continues.
It does, finding its place internationally, solidifying that sense of national identity. These ongoing projects, absolutely central to Taiwan's future.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, Taiwan's history is just incredibly layered, isn't it?
Yeah.
Indigenous foundations, multiple colonial periods, authoritarianism, and then this impressive move towards democracy and a very distinct identity.
And its location, as we said at the start, always made it focal point, always caught up in bigger regional and global currents that really shaped its unique path.
Is there one thing that particularly stands out as surprising or an aha moment?
Maybe the sheer speed of the economic miracle happening alongside the rise of things like environmentalism. It shows this incredible dynamism, this ability to transform and adapt quickly on multiple fronts, or perhaps just how globally connected it was even centuries ago under the Zheng regime.
Yeah, those trade links were impressive. We really hope for you, the learner, that this journey through Taiwan's history gives you a clearer, more nuanced picture. It's crucial context for understanding what's happening now and what might happen next.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a big question to ponder. As Taiwan keeps navigating its tricky relationship with the world, how will all this unique history shape its future role, especially in East Asia's changing landscape? And, are there lessons there for other nations trying to forge their own identity under pressure?